European leaders are in Washington following Friday's talks between Trump and Putin. What will that mean for the end of the war in Ukraine? We're going to talk about that and much more this morning on Trending. Right, well, good morning, everybody. I hope you all had a fantastic weekend. If you're in the UK, you enjoyed the nice sunshine, and wherever you are in the world, you had a nice weekend with your family, loved ones, and whatever you were up to. Well, Friday's meeting in Alaska between Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin has obviously made most of the headlines over the weekend and most of the headlines this morning. European leaders are all in Washington. You've got the leaders of the UK, France, Germany, Italy, the European Union and NATO all over in Washington for discussions along with Zelensky from Ukraine. I guess to probably try and convince Trump that he shouldn't get in bed with Putin, that he shouldn't trust Putin, X, Y, and Z. When really, if you want to bring about peace, people sit in a room, people make concessions, people agree that ultimately peace is the outcome and they work towards that. As we've pointed out many times on this program, peace is not the ultimate goal. So as a result, something will always get in the way to prevent peace from prevailing. This is a circus. This is a show. This is just one theatre stage show on the world stage. You've got Putin pretending or appearing to be the alternative against the New World Order and be separated and different. You've got Trump, portraying himself and the MAGA media portraying himself as this kind of maverick that's gone against the rest of the convention. And then you've got the European leaders, or the Union of the Willing, as they're calling them, who are all supposedly on the same side and spouting the same rhetoric when they work for the same people, they represent the same aims, and ultimately they're all working towards the same goals. They're just doing it in slightly different ways, and they're each playing their part to get there. It's like a football team. A football team has lots of different positions. Every player has a different role, has a different contribution to make, whether they're in goal, whether they're up front, whether they're in the middle. They're all doing different things, but they're working together ultimately to try and win the game. The same sort of principle you can apply to what's going on in the world. These people are working together. They're playing their different roles, their different parts. And also, what's very important is they're playing their different parts at different times. So Trump obviously is playing a role at the moment. Putin's playing a role at the moment. Starmer's playing a role at the moment. And maybe in 6 months, there'll be somebody else brought in to further that agenda in a slightly different way than they are. So ultimately today, I'm not expecting anything particularly exciting. I'm expecting probably Zelensky to come out and say that any concessions that were supposedly agreed between Trump and Putin, he rejects, because we can't let Putin appear to have won, which is very key. We can't let them appear to have won. Yet if you're the leader of a country that is currently at war and you're seeing people die every single day, whether that be civilians, whether that be soldiers on the front line, surely your ultimate goal as the leader is to bring about peace so that those people can return to their normal lives and people can stop dying. Instead, you see these egos take over. You see this posturing of, whoa, I can't let them do this, I can't let them do that. You just bring about peace, mate. You bring about peace and prosperity for your people. That's what put them there. Sorry, that's why they put you there, supposedly. Although in Zelensky's case, should have been out of office quite a while ago, as his president term is run out. But due to the country being at war, all elections have been suspended, and any discussions or any calls from people in Ukraine for elections have been quashed very, very quickly. I remember not too long ago, there was a football match in Europe played, and some fans held up, I think it was playing against a Ukrainian team in a European competition, and some Ukrainian fans held up Ukrainian flags and said, "We demand elections now." Well, they were kicked out of the stadium, and that story never went anywhere. Yet, as we say, with the media being so controlled, they control these narratives. Because if you were a genuinely independent, free-thinking journalist, a country that is being sold to you as this bastion of democracy against this evil communist state, if people in that country are calling for elections and they're being quashed, as a journalist, that's a very interesting story because it goes against the mainstream narrative of what you're being told. But obviously that's not what happens, because these stories are not told because they're not interesting enough. They're not told because they're not meant to be told. So what will happen today is going to be very interesting to see. We've already seen talks from Trump about ruling out Ukraine joining NATO, but then yesterday we saw from his defense minister talks of a security pact in a NATO-style agreement between Ukraine and the US. So I don't really know what the difference between those two are exactly. I'm sure we'll find out more today. He's ruled out giving Ukraine Crimea back or reclaiming Crimea from Russia that was annexed years ago after a referendum where they voted overwhelmingly to rejoin Russia. So it's an interesting situation we've got, because on the surface, Trump said he could end the war in 24 hours. Obviously, that hasn't happened. He's then been portrayed as this peace president who is trying to bring about peace around the world, except in Gaza, of course. He never talks about that. Yet you've got then his defense minister saying things like security guarantees, which go against what Trump says, and I highly doubt that Russia would accept a NATO-style security agreement between Ukraine and the US. You've also got a situation where the special envoy to Russia, Steve Witkoff, said yesterday that maybe we can't get this done. Maybe we're not in a position to be able to end this conflict. So there's quite conflicting statements that just make you think. It feels like they're just trying to make you just spin your head around, not really knowing where to look, not really having anything solid to grab hold of, not really having anything particularly to look forward to or particularly to get behind in the fact that this conflict could be coming towards an end. I don't know. I don't think the ultimate game and the ultimate agenda is to bring about peace. I don't. I think the ultimate goal is to bring about either a third world conflict on a large scale or potentially just keep that constant threat and risk there. Keep that constant state of fear of what am I going to wake up to today? At any point there's going to be a special news announcement that this has happened. I think because most people live in that state of fear, I would say, on a regular basis now. Ever since 2020, when you were seeing these every night, these, updates from the government on this is what's happening in the world, this is what's happening in your country, so many people have died today, and the very fearful state of mind that people got themselves in. We've then very quickly moved from that to Ukraine. We've then very quickly moved from that to what's going on in the Middle East and the cost of living and various other things. Now the migrant crisis. People are constantly in a state of fear and anxiety. And it feels like, is the plan to bring about a major conflict, or is the plan to always keep that potential there so that people are in a position where they don't really know what's coming next? Because that situation is very terrifying. I do understand that. It's called future shock. It's a torture technique where you basically don't know what's coming next, but you know something's coming next. So you're constantly in a state of fear and anxiety. You can't just get on with your lives. You're terrified to turn on the news in the morning. You're terrified to turn your phone on in the morning. Every phone call you get, every time there's a news bulletin, every newspaper you read, every special broadcast, you don't know what's coming. And I'd say a lot of people are in that state of mind. They don't know whether it's on a small scale in terms of whether it's a very insular thing, of they don't know what their next budget's going to be and how that's going to affect them financially. They don't know what the next news bulletin's going to be about missiles flying over their heads. They don't know whether they're going to walk into work and because of cutbacks or because of the economy, they're not going to have a job tomorrow. That state of fear and that state of anxiety that people are in is completely by design. It's absolutely not organic or by accident or by incompetence. It's completely by design. Right, we're going to touch on this story slightly to do with AI. Now, we've talked about AI a lot, talked about the very ultimate agenda of AI, which is to connect the human mind to it and therefore take over our thinking and create essentially a species of cyborgs that don't have the consciousness and capacity for free thought like we do now. But there's also other aspects of it. So this is a story from Sky News. Publishers issue warnings on AI-created books imitating sport autobiographies. So the creative industries of songwriting and script writing have been warning about AI for quite a long time, which is ironic, really, given Hollywood in its films in recent years has been dramatically shifting towards pushing AI and technology and technological interaction and intervention and integration with humanity. There's also been many talking about the fact that this is destroying the creative industries of writing, of songwriting, of script writing, as I said. Now, this publishing watch body here, the publishing industry has warned that books created by artificial intelligence, often imitating autobiographies, are a growing concern and called on retailers to issue clear warnings to consumers. Sky News has spent months tracking apparent AI creations, particularly sports books that have been sold on Amazon as Kindle ebooks, as well as printed versions. Some titles were removed after we informed the e-commerce giant, but we understand there's no immediate plans for Amazon to label content that was AI involved in generating. So essentially, they're not going to highlight the fact that a book, an autobiography written about somebody or a biography written about somebody is an AI-related biography. They're not going to do that. Now, the reason this is terrifying is because people have talked a lot about AI taking certain types of jobs, and a lot of people will argue, a lot of people actually don't have an issue with that. They talk about these sort of autonomous type jobs that, you know, you can just get someone to go in and do, which people still need to do, I'll add, because how are they feeding their families if they don't? So a big one, we've seen self-service checkouts. That's a massive one that have taken over so many jobs from that. Now, a lot of people probably don't argue with that, which is shocking, because how many people worked on checkouts 10 years ago compared to today? What are those people doing now, for example? No one thinks about that thing. They think very much about themselves. Oh, I can go and scan it myself. I'll get it done quicker. But they don't think about the collateral damage and the effect of that on other people's lives. But one of the arguments was that creative industries, AI would never be able to take over those jobs. Well, here's an example of how it actually can. Now, you can say, okay, right, but they're writing about sports stuff and the sport actually has to happen, so that the AI can't do that bit. Okay, you can get on board with that to a degree. They can't. You know, AI is not going to stand in front of a crowd at Anfield and score a goal at the Kop end and everyone's going to write about it 30 years later. Okay, fair enough. But again, this is another example of industries that people said AI could not attack and could not take jobs of, that it's going to and is. The creative industries of art are one of the most important things for humanity, because those types of people that are able to write incredible songs, write incredible scripts, write incredible novels, and in this case, write about stories and things that have actually happened in real life. Without, you know, the creative people on this earth, how boring would it be? You know, people years and years and years in the future, in the same way we do now, you look back at those people through history, and they're the people that you hold up to, you know, you hold to aloft. It's the artists, it's the creatives, it's your Leonardo da Vinci's, it's your Monets, it's your John Lennon's, it's characters like that, Jimi Hendrix, you know, these superstar people that were just so creative and so incredible. Yet this industry is going to be destroyed again by AI. So it's, as we've said many times, things start out a certain way and they may look a certain way. So, you know, Alexa, play me, you know, Penny Lane by the Beatles, please. That's where it starts. And I can't comprehend that for a start. I don't understand why you need to do that. Get up and do it yourself. Jeez. But then it becomes actually, Alexa, can you write me a song like Penny Lane by the Beatles, please? And then that industry's gone. Does that sound like a world you want to live in, really? It doesn't sound like one I want to live in, to be honest. I've got to say. Right, moving on. This is another story that involves AI to a degree. So this is a story here from the UK. Smart meters. So smart meters, as those of you in the UK will know, I'm sure you have the same sort of thing around the world. It tracks everything that you use in terms of energy. It's a very dangerous device in terms of the amount of radiation it releases through your home, hence why so many people, including myself, have refused to have them. Now, it moves on. Bin smart meters could be brought in to charge Brits for how much they throw away. Now, the concept of a smart meter for energy is that you pay for what you use, whereas previously you had a fixed tariff. So you had a tariff if you pay X amount a month. And providing you don't go insanely over that tariff, that's what you pay. So you knew what you were paying. So in terms of budgeting, it's much easier to budget for something when you know what you're paying. So they said smart meters would save you money. You'd pay as you went, and therefore you would be able to keep an eye on what you're spending, and it would save you money. Obviously, that's not the case, and anyone that has a smart meter knows, compared to their previous tariffs, they pay a lot more now. But this moves on to wastage, and there's going to be 2 or 3 or 4 angles they'll come at this from, and it's all to do with you being the problem. So Brits could soon be billed by weight of their rubbish under Bill Smart Meter proposals. And here's the interesting lines. Brits could one day be, which when I say Brits could one day, it means they're planning to do this, and stories like this are being put out to see how you react. You could be billed one day for the weight of the rubbish that you put in a controversial pay-as-you-throw system. The idea, likened to a smart meter for bins, would see lorries weigh household goods during waste collection with charges passed on to residents. Now, this is going to be the sales pitch, just like with smart meters. Advocates say that it could reduce waste, boost recycling, and here you go, even bring down your council tax bills just after they've put them up in most districts after saying they wouldn't. This model has been successfully used in the Netherlands, South Korea, and parts of the USA. For instance, apparently it's boosted recycling by 86% in those areas. Don't mention that it saved anyone any money, though, because it won't do. Can you name a time in your life where taxes have gone down and you've ended up with more money as a result of government decisions? Nope, neither can I. So whenever they say, we need to do this so we can bring your taxes down, the bit you need to do is always at your detriment. It's never for your benefit. It's always at your detriment. It's always, you've got to play for the team. You've got to be part of the greater good. And then on the outcome, you'll get what you want, which is you'll get lower taxes. Funny how that outcome never actually happens. Just like I said with smart meters for energy, you were sold that it would save you money. You were sold that it would put you more in control. You'd be in the driving seat. You wouldn't be at the behest of these naughty energy companies that they let get away with whatever. The outcome, not that at all. The outcome is basically you're threatened if you don't have a smart meter now. The amount of letters I've had recently, I'm sure you guys watching can relate to that as well. And the people that are on the smart meters are paying more. They also have these devices within their house which are emitting radiation, which is detrimental to their health. So, do you really think when it comes to bins they're going to be any different? They're going to sell you the fact that this will save you money. They're going to sell you the fact that this may be beneficial for climate change, for recycling, for the environment, X, Y, and Z. It will make a better, quality of life for the street because there'll be less rubbish put out on a Monday morning or whatever. There'll be so many awful sales pitches they'll use, which will just be complete fabrication. But I really sincerely hope now, because governments have always lied. Governments have lied for millennia. But the level that they are lying to now, and the number of people that are consciously aware to the fact that their governments are lying, and not just lying a little bit, they're lying on an absolutely industrial scale. The number of people that you can say that to now, and they'll go, yeah, I know, versus 20 years ago, is so high that I think when stories like this come out and they say, it will save you money, it'll be great, we'll clean rubbish up off the streets, we'll have a greener country, X, Y, and Z. I think the skepticism in people's minds will be significantly more than it would have been a quarter of a century ago, even a decade ago, even 5 years ago, maybe. Because they've been burned so many times before, they've seen stories like this so many times before, they've been lied to so many times before and manipulated. So you'd hope that people will start to evolve and learn and go, hang on a minute, when these guys say something, the reality of what actually happens compared to the sales pitch they give us are never the same, because they're not meant to be the same. They are coercing you. They are coercing you into something that they know will be at the detriment of you and your family. They're not going to say that, are they? They're not going to say that. The vampire's not going to stand at your door and go, can I come into your house so I can kill you, please? They're not. They're going to coerce you so that you let them in thinking they've got a different agenda. That's exactly what we're seeing here. They are manipulating you into compliance and into allowing them to do what they want to do. And I think we are at a time now when more people are starting to accept that. Even people that voted in the last election, even people that vote in elections as a matter of course now, they know that the politicians lie. They know that they manipulate, they twist information, They ignore certain pieces of information. They amplify other pieces of information to create a narrative that they want you to fall for. They know they do that. So with that comes the responsibility to go, well, call things like this out then, because that's BS. No one reading this story today should genuinely believe that if there is a weight for your rubbish, it's going to make your council tax go down. Because taxes don't go down. That's not what happens. They don't want you having more money in your pocket. What this will almost certainly lead to is this will be a stepping stone to increasing fines, to quotas of how much rubbish you can throw away, to green carbon credits and things like that. More fines if you don't recycle X% of your rubbish. If you chuck away over a certain amount in kilograms or whatever metric they use, you'll get fined X amount. And what you'll find almost certainly is that they will create an average of what the average household throws away. Let's say hypothetically it's a kilogram a week. It's obviously going to be more than that, but let's say it's a kilogram a week of rubbish. I bet they put their quota just under that. So if it's a kilogram a week that the average household throws away, they'll put their quota you've got to get under at 900 grams. Because then all of a sudden that brings everyone into it. And then people are rushing around trying to figure out ways to get themselves under. And more people will get charged. More and more people will then be at the behest of the local authorities and be charged and paying fines, X, Y, and Z. They're not stupid. They're predictable. Well, they are stupid, but they are very predictable. Right. Final story this morning. I've got some good news. There's a lot of bad news out there, but this is some good news. As we know, in the last few years, the world's gone insane when it comes to gender. What is a woman? No idea, mate. What is a man? No idea. No idea. Well, the country of Scotland has been just about as insane as any. You've had biological men put into women's prisons when those biological men were convicted of sexual-related crimes and they've been put into female prisons to serve their sentence because they decided they were trans. In the gap, I'll add, between being convicted and being sentenced. Convenient. So, this is a story from the BBC. Campaigners lodge appeal action over gender rules for schools and prisons, because it's gone into schools as well. Campaigners who won a legal victory on the definition of a woman are taking action against the Scottish government over the policies that they say are inconsistent with the ruling. So, the judge ruled that the words women and sex in the Equality Act refer to biological women and biological sex, after a group called Women Scotland brought the case forward. Now, obviously, this is now being appealed, like I say, but the fact that the judge and the initial ruling was a sensible one, which is the fact that biological women are women, biological men are men. In prisons, current guidelines allow transgender women, so men, to be admitted into a women's estate if the person does not meet the violence against women and girls criteria based on unacceptable risk of harm, X, Y, and Z. If a biological man is going into a women's prison, they pose a risk of harm. So that's the rule currently in Scotland. However, Women Scotland allege that these policies are inconsistent with the Supreme Court judgment and remain stubbornly in place. So when I said this is good news, it's good news in the sense of this isn't going away, but in Scotland, they still allow biological men to go into women's prisons. The fact that the Supreme Court in the UK, the Supreme Court, which technically, obviously the UK, that's Scotland as well, ruled that a biological woman is what a woman is. It defined it, and now all of a sudden your Prime Minister knows what a woman is now because the Supreme Court told him. He didn't know before that. I wonder how his wife feels about that. Don't even know what you are, love. Well, to be fair, we won't go there. I'm sure that will come out at some point in the future. His friends from Ukraine that torched his car. I'm not sure. Yeah, anyway, we'll leave that one there. But the point is, the fact that this isn't going away, the fact that people are campaigning here just shows that there's some good things going out there. There's some good things going on. Because if you think about this, a few years ago, organisations like Women Scotland wouldn't have said anything. And that's why for so many years, feminist groups have been very silent when it has come to the deletion of female rights, when it's come to the deletion of safe spaces for women, and so on. The sharing of gender-neutral toilets, changing rooms, biological men appearing in women's sports. For a long time, the feminists have actually been very quiet on this issue, which is terrifying, really, given they are supposedly there to fight for equality for women. Well, actually, what's then happened is you've got biological men have come in and taken over, which is quite ironic, really. It'd be funny if it wasn't so tragic. But it's now got to the point, because of that Supreme Court ruling, that these organisations actually feel comfortable to stand up, because their defence is, well, the Supreme Court said this. That, to me, is pathetic. Your defence for standing up for the fact that a biological woman is a biological woman, and the fact that a man, whatever he thinks he might be, should never be allowed in a women's prison, in a women's sport, in a women's school, in a women's toilet, should never be allowed in girls' changing rooms. You shouldn't need the Supreme Court to tell you that that's an acceptable opinion. Biology, decency, and your own eyes tell you that is an acceptable opinion. Because that's not an opinion. That's fact. That's reality. That's the truth. You can't argue with that. That's George Orwell's 2 + 2 = 4. For years, they've convinced you it equals 5. And because the Supreme Court has said it equals 4 again, all of a sudden, I can say the truth. It's really, really tragic that it's had to lead to that to get here. What has happened to people? Grow some backbone. Just because somebody disagrees with you doesn't mean you're wrong. Someone could come in now and say, this table, that's not hard, that. If you hit that, it won't hurt. And I could sit here and go, okay, yeah, I respect your opinion. Or I could go, well, no, that hurt. That's a fact. It's hard. I don't care if that triggers you. A biological man should never be in any of those women's spaces I just mentioned. Because where does it end? That's the problem. Where does it end? You know, I'm a massive combat sports fan, and I've seen literally stories and examples of women having their skulls fractured in UFC octagon rings because they're fighting biological men. You saw at the last Olympics a situation where women that had worked for years in the boxing discipline had no chance because of who they were competing against. You've seen it in swimming with Leah Thomas. See it in other sports. It's terrifying that people have accepted this, and now all of a sudden in the UK, because the Supreme Court say, no, a biological woman is a woman, then now all of a sudden people are more comfortable saying it. Sex and gender is not an opinion. It's literally ingrained in your DNA. If you have an XX chromosome, you're a woman. If you have an XY chromosome, you are a man. No amount of clothing, operations, opinions, or psychological gymnastics is going to change that reality. And it's time to be sensible on this issue and just say that out loud, regardless of what that does to people. It's a fact. If people are born and think they feel uncomfortable in their body and they don't understand why, those people should get support, they should get help. But we should not be allowing what we have allowed or what has been allowed in recent years. Because where does it end? And we should absolutely not be accepting the encouraging of children with gender dysphoria. It's psychological abuse. It's child abuse, in my opinion. And a lot of people deserve to go to jail for it, for what has happened. Right. I want to finish today's episode, actually, on something quite interesting. I mentioned about protecting children there. And something happened yesterday which really got me thinking about something. So we talk about the fact that, you know, children are new to the world. We need to protect them. We need to give them, you know, the start in life. We need to teach them values. Of course, we do that. And we look at adults as, you know, we've got it all figured out, or we're starting to get it all figured out. And I wonder, actually, how often do we as adults look at kids and go, what can we learn from you? Because I've learned so much from my kids. And in the last few weeks, I've learned something incredible from my son, my oldest son, Travis. So anyone that follows me on social media will know a few weeks ago he fell off some monkey bars at school and he broke his arm really badly, had surgery. You know, it was really brutal. And Travis loves football. He plays 3 times a week, massive football fan. And yesterday I took him for the first time in 10 weeks, first time since he broke his arm. And I was a little bit apprehensive as to how he would be, whether he would get, you know, stuck in or he'd be a bit tentative, a bit afraid to get into tackles and so on. He scored 2 goals. His team won 2-1 and he got man of the match. And he got stuck in from the second he got there. And that's honestly one of the proudest moments I've had as a parent was watching that. And I just got to think, we can learn so much from kids. Because if you look at kids don't overthink things generally, especially when they're young. So Travis is 5. Kids just get on with it. They don't dwell on things. Kids can go from laughing to crying back to laughing in the space of a minute. They don't dwell on things. They live in the moment. They play with anyone. Kids don't see colour. They don't see race. They don't see culture. They don't see religion. They just play with each other. You stick an Indian child, a North African child, a European child in a room, they'll just play. They won't even notice the colour. Kids don't really know, young kids don't even notice whether they're playing with a boy or a girl half the time. They just play. They're in the moment. They're not have a preconceived idea of somebody and they just get on with it. They're not too fixed on their emotions. And they bounce back really quickly. Kids have this incredible resilience. And I look and think, okay, that's not going to, in that, you know, those things are not going to serve you in the world as an adult if you are completely those things. There needs to be an evolution of that to a degree. But then I look at adults and go, we've gone way too far the other way. People prejudge everybody. They make opinions based on somebody's appearance before they even spoken to them. People dwell on emotions and they let things fester and they let things eat them alive for years. In often cases, because something that might have happened 20 years ago. They don't live in the moment. They live in the past or they live in the future, most adults. They're scared about what the future may hold and they're regretful about what the past contained. That's massive. What about looking and going, maybe the perfect scenario is a happy medium somewhere in the middle? And I think that's my philosophical opinion for today, which is I think we can look at kids and we can learn a hell of a lot more from them than we think we can. And we forget as we become adults and we take on responsibilities and we look at the world very differently as the naivety of being a child and the ignorance of being a child in the sense of what the world really is like. It is taken away from us, that innocence. And we forget about the great things that there was about being a kid and the great benefits and the great things that we can take from childhood and still bring into our adulthood. For example, big one, someone said this to me a few years ago, kids just play. They have what they call playtime, where the whole point of that is to have fun. The whole point of that is to do something that makes you smile. Most adults don't do that. Most adults don't do that at all. Well, that sounds pretty unhealthy to me. Now, I'm not suggesting that you get the doll's house back out, unless that's what you want to do. But time allocated to do something that you enjoy, time allocated to do something that's going to make you smile and is going to reinvigorate and re-energize you to then get on with the rest of your life, I don't see anything wrong with that whatsoever. In fact, I would actively encourage people to do that. So that's my point to finish on today's episode. It's just something that crossed my mind yesterday when I was watching the football and thought, you know, we can learn a hell of a lot more than we think we can. And we need to give kids, I think, a bit more credit. That actually, they've got a few things figured out that maybe we've forgotten. And if we remembered that, maybe as an adult, our lives would be a little bit more, certainly a little happier and maybe smile a little bit more often. Well, thank you very much for tuning in with me this morning. I hope you've enjoyed that episode and found it insightful. Gareth will be back with you tomorrow morning at 10 o'clock. Until then, have a fantastic start to your week and we will see you then.